Lindsay Epperly, a founder and CEO who's ready to rewrite the definition of imposter syndrome. I created Who Made You the Boss to let you know that you're not alone. If you've been wondering whether your burnout is actually a sign toward evolution, or if perhaps there's something more to these challenges we face as leaders, creatives, and entrepreneurs, you're in the right place if you're looking to embrace the challenges you once perceived as negative, if you're ready to own your entire story, and if you're working to level up your business in ways you never thought possible. You'll learn all of this and more by listening in and doing the hard work you know you were meant to do. So let's get started together today on Who Made You the Boss. Welcome back to Who Made You the Boss. In today's episode, I'm joined by leadership expert Jenni Catron, a former business coach of mine who opens up about the unspoken challenge of loneliness that often comes with leadership, as well as the importance of building meaningful support. Jenni is the founder and CEO of the Foresight Group and the author of The 4 Dimensions of Extraordinary Leadership, as well as the upcoming Culture Matters, a framework for helping your team grow, thrive, and be unstoppable, which, by the way, releases next week. So go get your pre-order copy now. Today, Jenni shares her journey of overcoming isolation by embracing mentorship, peer groups, and vulnerability in her leadership style. Whether you're at the top of your organization or striving to lead with empathy, this conversation offers actionable insights for creating a thriving, connected culture. After the episode, visit our Substack for exclusive resources to help you apply these valuable lessons to your leadership journey. All right, listeners, you are in for a treat today because we have a friend and coach of mine, Jenni. Honestly, Jenni, you and I met through my very first mentor, and then you wound up becoming a mentor. So I think it is so cool to actually have this opportunity to have you on.
I'm so thrilled, Lindsay. It's so fun to watch the journey because I guess we've known each other probably over 5 years, 6 years.
Yeah, 5, 6 years.
And so fun to watch the journey on your, just how you've led your business and grown it and grown your family and all that fun stuff. So thanks for having me.
Gosh, thank you. Yeah, you've been a part of some really pivotal moments. Maybe we'll get into some of those today, like how I decided to go into business with my husband. I remember coaching with you at that point.
Yes, those were some big discussions because we were discussing that even while you were still engaged.
Yes.
And,
yes.
so
you were probably like, I did not sign up for this marriage counseling. I'm supposed to be your business coach.
But it's so fun to see how you guys have just, you've just led through all of that and found your lanes as individuals. I love it so much.
Thank you. Well, it speaks a lot too. You did a great job of coaching me during that season, during a very pivotal season. And I'm excited for our listeners to learn from you today too, because, you and I were just talking and our focus this season on Who Made You the Boss is passion. And I think it is safe to say that leadership is a pretty clear passion of yours. Like you've written books around it. You've built a company around it. It's kind of your jam. Spoken to audiences. And I just want to talk a little bit about why is it important? Like, what does leadership mean to you? Why is it important we each cultivate our own leadership, whether we consider ourselves leaders or not, whether we are actually leading people? I want to hear your perspective on it. Can you tell us more about leadership and what it means to you?
For sure. And it kind of was an accidental passion for me, Lindsay. So backstory a bit is I am a A-type firstborn overachiever. I am make things happen, get it done, and I will bulldoze you if you're in my way. So a younger, kind of more rough around the edges version of me was not a great leader. And I had a mentor at one point say to me, Jenni, if you want to work with widgets, go work in a factory. But if you want to work with people, you have to learn to love them, to lead them. And that was the aha moment for me of I did not understand what leadership means, right? I was all about achieving my goals. I was about climbing the ladder. And I make myself sound kind of ridiculous, but I was just ambitious and driven. And that was presenting itself in a way that I was not conscious of my influence on the people around me. And so that conversation with my mentor just put me in this place of saying, well, what does leadership really mean? I kind of heard the word and, but I hadn't really paid that much attention to it. But I began to dig in, and John Maxwell, who is, kind of the godfather of leadership, says leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And so I got curious about the influence word, which means the power to change or affect someone. And that is what stopped me in my tracks, because I began to think about the influence that I was having on the people around me. I literally, Lindsay, I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but I had an assistant who worked for me in my very early days of leadership who was in tears every day because I was just so driven and she just wasn't keeping up, and I was not emotionally intelligent enough to understand how to engage her better. It was a total train wreck, right? And I began to look at some of those moments and recognize I'm changing or affecting the lives of the people who are interacting with me day to day, whether I'm actually, in a position of management or leadership, or whether I'm just, in relationship with people. My influence is changing or affecting them. And is that positive or is it negative? And that is what sparked my passion for leadership, because I was like, I do not want to be the person that poor girl is going home crying about every night to her spouse, right? Like, I don't want to be the person that's making somebody's work experience miserable.
Yeah.
And of course we can apply that because leadership and influence applies in our families, with our friends, with our neighbors, with our coworkers.
Yeah.
So that's where the passion came from me, is this recognition that leadership is really sacred work because we are changing and affecting the lives of the people around us. And that's where the passion was birthed from and became, this thing I've given the better part of 20 years to now.
Yes. Yeah. Gosh, thank you for sharing that. And I picked up on something that you said in it that was when I became conscious of the influence I had on others.
That's
And
right.
I think that's so special, because I think to a listener, a lot of people just think, oh, a leader, that's going to be someone in management, or that's someone who
Right.
is over, a group of people or whatever. But that's not true. I mean, the truth of it is we have an impact on ourselves. We have an impact on our
That's right.
neighbors. We have an impact on our family. Like, to be conscious of the impact and
That's right.
to recognize that, oh, if I just work a little bit harder at myself, I can lift others up too. Just like you gave in that example. Hopefully your assistant has encountered
I,
a
I
different
hope
version of you, or
Right? Yeah, I hope the people since then have had a much better experience of me. I know it's not perfect, but it was a wake-up call, right? It
yeah.
was this, and I realize not everybody is maybe driven and as clueless as I was in those early days, but I think all of us underestimate that influence that we have with others, right? Like, and I love that you acknowledge that too, that it's not just about a position of a position of leadership. It's that recognition of the relationships in our lives, and that we are influencing others day in and day out. And that is the starting point of leadership. That's the beginning points of leadership. And so all of us, in whatever roles we're in, we are changing and affecting the lives of people every day. And the awareness of that is a really big thing.
Okay, so it starts with the awareness, and this all pursued in a passion for you. Like, you became, once you realized it, connect the dots for me. How did you go from, okay, I am going to become a better version of a leader to myself, to now I'm dedicating my entire life to helping other people lead? Like, what was the evolution of that for you?
Yeah, I love that question so much, because it was kind of accidental. I remember that key conversation with the mentor and recognizing I have got to figure this out. And so I picked up my first leadership book. It was actually John Maxwell's 21 Most Powerful Minutes in a Leader's Day. So it was based on his laws of leadership, but it had a little bit of nuance to it. And I just devoured it, Lindsay. So I'm one of those people that if I realize that I need to learn something, then I become a little fixated on figuring it out, right? Like, I've got to figure this out. What does this look like, and how do I do it? And the more I read, and then I started going to conferences and, just trying to absorb leadership resources everywhere I could. And then I began to observe my interactions with my team. So I was actively leading a team. In fact, I had recently been promoted at that point. And, so then I was looking at my actions in real time. And I have this journal. I'm looking over here because it's over on this bookshelf over here. I have this little journal because it's still there, but it's this little red journal that I began to write all my observations of leadership. I began to write. So this is the geek in me, right? This is the passion coming out. I began to write observations of myself. Okay, how did I do in that meeting? What could I have done better? How did I interact with that person? Did I lose my patience there? What did they need from me? Should I have communicated better? So I would just start processing in real time dissecting my leadership. And then I would also do it of the leaders around me. So that's why I'm like, that sacred little journal.
A little bit of a burn book.
Right. It's a little bit of a burn book. But it was like, I just, we said it starts with awareness, but then it was like, I just wanted it to bring it to my consciousness at all times of like, how am I showing up? How are people experiencing me? And how do I keep putting good leadership principles into action? One thing that I stumbled upon a couple of years ago, Barna, which is a research organization, did a study, and they found that 82% of 18 to 34-year-olds say that we're in a leadership crisis because there are not enough good leaders. I think that's the way it's phrased. Like 82% of 18 to 34-year-olds say that we're in a leadership crisis as a country.
Yeah.
And I thought that's heartbreaking, because I think about the leaders who have influenced me. And that was part of the motivation in this becoming such a passion for me, was I would reflect on the people in my journey who had been remarkable leaders, right? Like, I didn't know the leadership word maybe when I was a 15-year-old kid managing an ice cream shop. But the owner of that ice cream shop, who just deeply believed in me, gave me opportunities, gave me opportunity to manage and run this little small town business, as a 16-year-old kid. Like, her leadership influence was so significant. So I began to look at who are all the people in my story that have had such an impact on me. And I want to make sure that's how I show up for others. And so, recognizing that there's such an opportunity for more people to experience healthy leadership, and how do we do that? Like, how do we make that possible?
Yeah. I mean, I feel that. That's the whole reason I started this podcast, right? I was like, I am so wondering if anyone else isn't looking in the mirror and feeling this way. And if so, we've got to be able to call this out so that we can all become healthier leaders together. I want to just, listeners can tangibly take away what you just talked about with keeping that journal. I mean, I think that's such a fascinating idea for anything that we're passionate about, for anything that we want to get better at, to just keep this observation journal. Did you ask other people their perspective and observation of you as well? Was this just purely self-assessment? That's
so good.
Besides the burn book, what else went into this?
Yes, it's so good. So a couple of things. I had another friend who in that season, we were peers. We were in two different departments within the company that we worked in, but she was equally passionate about leadership. And we would pick a leadership book, and we would go to lunch every Friday and study a chapter together. And then we would tell each other what we saw in each other. Okay, so we'd be studying this topic on communication. And I would tell her, hey, here's where I see you doing really well. Here's some things I think you could improve upon. And then she would do the same for me. And we worked in the same company. We were different departments, but we overlapped a lot in, just our interaction. And so that was just one of because there's no cost outside of buying a book. I'm going to lunch with a friend who I deeply love, respect, and believe in. And and that was, she, same thing with me. And so we just gave each other peer-to-peer feedback. And then we were also we started a book club with other peers in our company. And so we started this book club, and we would buy all the latest leadership books, and then we would devour them together. And we were all in our 20s and early 30s when we did this. And so those are some of the richest memories I have of getting other people around me, people who saw my interaction day to day, who could actually give me real-time feedback. But I had to build the relationships that made that comfortable and safe, right? To get that true, honest feedback. I honestly think, Lindsay, and I might be getting ahead of you a little bit, but I honestly think as I've grown in leadership role and responsibility, and now I lead my own company, I think it's significantly harder to get good feedback on my leadership. Right? Because now everybody reports to me. And so, we're thinking of a lot of our peers and entrepreneurs who are leading things that you're starting. I find now that I have to dig a lot more to get good, honest feedback about my leadership. Because back in the day when I was kind of in mid-level, management within the organization, I had plenty of peers who would be happy to point out, the things that they felt like I could be improving upon. And now I've got to really dig for it. I feel like it's harder to get that feedback.
tying into what you're saying, the more you succeed, the more you become a greater leader, it becomes lonely and more isolating. And I
For
think
sure.
that there is a reason that over 80%, whatever that statistic was that you just threw out, right, believe that
Yeah.
we're in a leadership crisis. And I think it's because people don't necessarily want to go down that road because it feels so alone. Like it just
Yes.
feels so lonely. And you even have a quote on your website about it. Leadership is lonely, but I don't believe it is meant to be isolating. So it's almost like you're pulling those two things apart, right? One is a
That's right.
given. Leadership will
Yeah.
be lonely, but
Yeah.
you don't have to do it alone. And
Alone.
so talk to me about that because that is
Yeah.
something I have felt and I'm sure a number of listeners have it resonates with them as well.
I think it's such an important distinction because the further you go up the organization, it is more lonely. You have fewer peers, and you have greater responsibility. So it isn't uncommon for leadership to get lonely, but it doesn't need to be isolating in that you've got to fight then for your circles. Like you've got to fight for, okay, where are the places where I'm not in charge everywhere I go? So for me now, I lead my own company. I'm a consultant. So nearly every room that I walk into, I'm in charge, right?
Mm,
Like if I'm doing a workshop with an organization or if I'm coaching an executive, like when I engage the space, I'm the leader in the room.
yeah.
And so I have to fight for the places where I'm not the leader in the room. And I think that's a really important piece when you do find yourself in, those higher levels of leadership. That loneliness starts to show up when you feel like you don't have anybody who understands your role or your responsibilities.
Mhm.
So finding the peer groups, you've done this too, Lindsay. I know that you've been so intentional with this of finding like cohorts, peer groups, mentors, coaches, people that can bring insight and that you don't have to be the one who's responsible for every environment or every room you're in. I think that's the biggest like learning for me as especially as I launched my company
Mhm.
was I have to find other peers. I have to have my own coach. Yes, I'm a coach, but I have to have a coach, speaking into my life. So I think I'm almost forgetting the actual question you asked, but I think just finding those, and you have to fight for it because you don't have time
Yeah.
for it, right?
Yeah.
Like you have to prioritize it because it's for your greater long-term health as a leader.
Right. So what you're saying is you are intentionally going out, you're finding others who are in seasons ahead of you. So
That's
that where
right.
it's not just you're the leader in the room, you're looking for community, peers, accountability, and others who are seasons ahead that can pour into you because otherwise, if it's
Yeah.
just you, it's just you.
That's right. I think this quote has been attributed to a few different people, so I'm not sure the original source, but it says something like, "If you're the smartest person at the table, you're in the wrong room."
Yeah.
You've
Yeah.
probably heard that one too,
Yeah.
right? Like, and I think that's such a good litmus test for us when we are, the head of an organization, we're in the C-suite, wherever, whatever it might be, we're the head of the department. If you're always the smartest person at the
Mhm.
table or the more experienced person at the table might be a great way to frame it, then not necessarily that it's the wrong room, but that's not the only room you should be in, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so I think just recognizing that and the discipline of creating and when you're launching a business, and Lindsay, you know this, like you're hustling every minute to just make things happen and keep things moving. And it feels like a luxury to take time out for your development,
Mm.
whether
Mhm.
that's coaching, whether that's a peer group or a mentoring cohort or whatever it might be. It's like, I don't feel like I have the luxury of that. I don't feel like I
Right.
have the time to spend on that or the money to spend on that. I was literally doing some planning for the coming year. And I thought, I'm willing to cut something else in my business right now to create more resources for some coaching that I want to do to help me in this next stage of business growth. And it was such an interesting aha because I think historically I've always been more inclined to, well, I need to pour that into the business.
Yes.
But pouring it into my leadership development is actually pouring it into the business, right?
It is. It is, but it's so counterintuitive.
Totally. Yeah. How have you fought that, Lindsay? I'm trying to
Ah,
turn that
gosh.
question back around on you.
No, it's a good question. Thank you. I should also point out that Jenni is also a podcast host. So this is why you're great at asking questions. How have I fought that? I mean, it is. I will say, let's camp out on just the whole idea of isolation, right? And I was with a group of entrepreneurs a couple of weeks ago, actually, Brian and Shannon, that we've
Yeah.
mentioned that we met through, and I interviewed Shannon for season 3 of the podcast, put this together because they wanted to call out some of the demons that essentially come with entrepreneurship.
That's
And
right.
of the 4 things they pointed out, loneliness and isolation was one. And it
Mm,
was for the first time, I think I've ever been around other people admitting it. And so it's
yes.
really been top of mind lately. And when I saw this on your website, tying it into leadership, I thought that was a light bulb moment, So when I think about combating it, it's similar to you, I would seek out mentors, I would seek out peers. But even as deep as I went with some of those peer groups, I don't think the words loneliness and the words isolation actually were spoken. I mean, I think we would talk
Wow.
about, it's hard and I've got this and and I can relate because I have this, but very rarely did we even go to that level of depth to say, I feel so alone. So
Right. It's
in
vulnerable.
retrospect, yeah, I mean, it's extremely vulnerable. And even with some of your closest friends, like, I don't know that I had reached that level of vulnerability. And maybe
Sure.
it's giving ourselves more permission to use those words. I think for me, oftentimes it would be, well, I'm leading a team and I love vulnerability. I love being vulnerable, but to say you're lonely, like, oh, is she okay? I mean, like
Right.
there's a
Yeah.
certain level, there's shades of vulnerability. And I think that one is one of the most.
That's a great, yeah, that's a great observation because it's hard to, it's maybe even to admit it to yourself, right?
Mhm.
Of like,
Mhm.
because you're surrounded by people.
Yeah.
That's the irony of it. In so many ways, you're surrounded by people, you're surrounded by your team. It almost feels a little, am I being a little too dramatic, maybe, of like
Right.
to say that I'm lonely.
But
But
Jenny, it's not. It's so interesting. I'll give you a quick story. I mentioned to you, and by this point, it's all very public since we're airing the podcast. That I recently stepped aside from the CEO role in my
right.
company, and I stood up and I delivered that information to 60 plus team members who were in the room, and Brian and Shannon were actually in that room as well.
Mhm, mhm.
They flew out to Texas to be there to
That's
celebrate and
awesome.
everything. It was amazing. But I will never forget the way I felt after delivering that news. The one person that I found after that was Shannon. I found her across the room. I ran
Mhm.
over to her. She embraced me in a hug and I sobbed because
Oh,
I felt like she was the only safe place in that entire room, right? She's
that's
the
right.
only
Only
person
person who
that
understood it. Yeah.
understood.
Yep.
So,
Yeah,
so
that's
it's that. And
huge.
she had been mentoring me for 8 years. So of course we built up that relationship. And if that's the only person that I have, that's enough for me. But it's rare that we even
And
have that.
having that one person, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's huge.
Uh,
And I love I think it's important that you pointed out, like, that was the one person in the room, right?
mhm.
And that was even that was a big commitment for them to come all of that way. And
Yes.
like, but having that safe space and
Mhm.
somebody who knows you, I think that's the other piece of it, right? Because it's loneliness, like, often comes from feeling only partially known.
Yeah.
I'm kind of
Yeah.
working this out, like, as we're talking about it.
Let's verbally process.
Right, yeah, we're really processing. But I think again, for leaders, so many rooms, people know parts of us, right? Like, all of our
Mhm.
team, there's levels of vulnerability, but there's certain things that we can't share fully or whatever it
Yeah.
might be. And so the level of relationship that's required to be completely vulnerable, for somebody to know us that well. And like you said,
Yeah.
it's an 8-year relationship for you guys. That's
Right.
powerful.
It really is. And even my husband who was there in that room, it was a different dynamic because he's stepping into the CEO role. He's got something else that he's not given that up before and she
Right.
had. Um Talk to me about though this idea of being known, and you have an incredible book that as this airs is either just about to come out so we can pre-order it or has recently come out so go order it. Culture Matters. Like, talk to me
Mhm.
about how all of this manifests in culture and how we as leaders can set the table for our companies to actually be places where people feel like they can be seen.
Right. Right, right, right. Well, you just set that up beautifully. The progression for me was this passion for leadership that was
Yeah.
birthed gratefully rather early on in my career, so that it didn't completely like I didn't completely like make it a train wreck. But that passion of leadership birthed and that understanding of influence. And then I began to see, like, as I became a better leader and I was more intentional in how I was showing up, how that so disproportionately affected the team. right? Like as I was growing and being a stronger leader, more conscious of my leadership, it was like the snowball effect of the momentum that the team gained, like their sense of trust, their confidence, as I was modeling who we are at our best, which is one of my like little litmus test questions for culture is like, what do we look like at our best? As I was showing up, better as a leader, that was having a ripple effect on the entire team. And so then I began to see its influence on the culture. And then a key moment for me was, so I was working in the record business in Nashville at this time. So that was the context of all of this. And we went through a corporate merger, and the team that I had been a part of was phenomenal. Like, I mean, great team, great culture, lots of room for me to grow and, do the messiness of growing as a young leader. And then we were merged with another division. And overnight, my experience with the company went from amazing to awful, right? Like it was like night and day experience. And I just began to dig into that going, what in the world is this about? Like we're still technically owned by the same corporation. We're just two different divisions. And it was just radically different experience as an employee. And that's what perked my passion for employee culture, like organizational culture, is to say culture matters, like the environment, the experience. Like I went from 8 years of absolutely loving my job, growing, learning, just accomplishing amazing goals and things as a company. And then overnight, it went to just this horrible experience where I barely stayed a year, and only because a mentor begged me to stay, right? Like, I mean, I was ready to hightail it out of there. And I thought I was going to be there for forever. And I thought there is such a radical difference here in the experience that I'm having and what contributes to that. So then I began doing all of my research and digging in and trying to make sense of it, and recognizing that leaders carry disproportionate influence over the culture of the organization. Everybody's contributing. Every person on the team is influencing how you experience your team dynamics. But leaders have disproportionate influence over that. And if a leader's not conscious of the experience the team is having, they create gridlock organizationally, right? Like if I am unsure of my place, if I'm not sure of what our goals are or what we're trying to accomplish, if there's infighting, if there's gossip, if there's just politics and things that are in the culture, then I'm less engaged as an employee, right? Like that is not an environment I want to give my best to. So I'm going to hedge, I'm going to protect, I'm going to quiet quit. And if everybody's doing that, it's quicksand. It's organizational quicksand. And so what I found is that as leaders got intentional about understanding who are we at our best, like what do we look like? What are the values that guide us, the behaviors that we operate around, like starting to define giving a picture of this is how we do things here. This is how we operate as a team. This is who we are. And I know you've done that so well in your company, because I think we worked on values at some point.
Yeah, you're right
as well. But, getting clear about this is who we are as a team. This is how we work together to achieve this mission. We have an amazing mission, whatever business you're a part of. Like you're there because there's an amazing mission. There's a mission you want to accomplish, a way that you want to impact the world. And so you need a team of people who are aligned, who understand this is how we do this together. And that clarification, when leaders provide that level of clarity, my definition of culture is who we are and how we work together to achieve the mission. So as soon as a leader gives clarity to those things and helps everybody understand, here's how you succeed, here's how we win together, then you start to see the momentum that happens with the team. And so that's how my passion progressed. It was like this me wanting to be a good leader and understanding the influence and the impact on the team, but then recognizing, gosh, as I am that much more intentional as a leader and I'm recognizing the impact I have on culture, we can build unstoppable teams, right? Our ability to achieve the mission is exponentially greater when a leader's leading themselves well and they're leading the team well. And so that's why culture matters. I think everybody wants to be a part of something significant, right? Like we all want to give our lives and the best hours of our day to meaningful work. Most organizations don't lack a clear purpose. They often lack an understanding of how to develop a team to achieve that purpose.
Mm.
And that's the essence of Culture Matters, like helping you give you a framework to build that kind of team.
Yes. So then would your target reader be the leaders who are building this? Would it also be the individuals who are taking part? Like, tell me more about, because as you were speaking all of that, I kept thinking, a leader's job is to keep the culture, it's to set the tone. It's exactly what you're saying. But
Right.
there's also, I think teams are more excited these days to be engaged with it. And so what can I do to help? How can I continue my own learning? Like,
That's
how
right.
would every, individual on that spectrum interact with this book and with the resources you're putting out with?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I think for sure, the senior leader has disproportionate influence on the culture. So
Mhm.
it's for sure for you because you want to be setting the tone and I literally give you a whole framework of like, hey, here's how to assess, define, and build the culture you aspire to. But every team member is contributing to culture. So ideally, this is a book your whole team reads together and says, okay, how do we do this together? How do we build an environment that we love being a part of? How
Mhm.
do we achieve the mission together? Because it's all about the mission. We're not here just, to hang out and have fun. That's a social club somewhere. Like
Yeah.
in work, we're a team on a mission. And so I think the best way to read it is a group reading it together
Mhm.
and saying, okay, how can we make this actionable? How can we do
Oh,
this together? But if you lead a department or a team of any kind, like this is also a great resource for you because you can influence that team that you're responsible for. Even if you're not at a seat where you can influence the whole organization, you can definitely impact the culture of the team that you lead.
yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. I love diving into it with you because as of recording this, I haven't had a chance to read it yet as we are a few months out from it being released, but I'm so
Right, right.
excited for you because I read your other books and they are phenomenal and I've
Yes.
coached with you and you just pour so much heart and soul into what you're doing, into your passion to help develop leaders. So, listeners, I hope you've gotten something out of today. I know I have, but Jenni, I want to turn it to you. The last question we always ask everyone comes from my own dinner table as around the table every night my family asks, what made you smile today? My
Love it.
four-year-old daughter has turned that into what was your happy today? So I know we're only, halfway through the day, but I'm curious what your happy was today.
Oh, I love that question. I could just envision it around your dinner
Right?
table for sure. Um, my happy today was that honestly, today was the official like launch of pre-order. So I know when listeners listen to this, we're near the
Yes.
book release, but I sent in my final edits, like the book is done and it's starting to get out into the world in pre-orders. And so,
Oh,
and Lindsay, just the conversation of, your heart and care for the passion of leadership and the opportunity to reconnect with you that's definitely a happy.
it's always fun. I'm so happy to have had this conversation. And I can tell you the first thing I'm going to do once I get off of this Zoom call is go and pre order the book, as everyone else should definitely order it now that it is out. Thanks,
Awesome.
Jenni.
Thanks so much, Lindsay.
If you've gained some valuable insights from listening to Who Made You the Boss, there are two ways we ask our listeners to show us some love. First, share this episode with a friend who you know would benefit. The more we impact others, the more we can grow our resources to impact you. It's a win-win and it helps us a ton. Second, if you'll take a moment to leave Who Made You the Boss a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcast platform, that helps us continue create meaningful work and it just makes our day. Thank you, listeners, for being part of this journey. Until next time, keep leading, keep learning, and keep being the boss of your own incredible story.